My name's Anna. I'm the Co-operative Party's Policy Officer, and the face that by the end of lockdown you're going to be thoroughly bored of. But it is a pleasure to be here today with Harriet English from the Plunkett Foundation, and we will kick off hearing from her very shortly. Before we do, and apologies for those of you who heard my housekeeping last time, a quick bit of what's what with our Zoom calls. I will chair and host the discussion. I'll help facilitate questions afterwards, but I'm by no means the expert, so do sort of hang on and listen carefully to Harriet's contributions. We will be taking questions after Harriet's presentation, so if something occurs to you while she's chatting, hold it to yourself, and we will make sure we have time to get on to as many questions as possible afterwards, but trying to stick to time where possible. Before I kick off, we are recording this. Not everyone's able to join us live, and we put these on YouTube so that people who couldn't join us in person, albeit remotely, are able to catch up on everything we talked about and get involved after the event. If you don't want your face to be recorded, then you can turn off your video. If you're on an iPad or a computer or your phone screen, you go to the bottom and you can stop video. It's the bottom left of your screen. So if you don't want to be recorded, please turn off your video now. But if you're fine, otherwise, keep it on. I hope that you're all dressed and up for the day and no one's in pajamas. During the meeting, if you do want to ask a question, you can do so. I've muted you all so that you don't talk over each other. So to ask a question, you need to do it using the participate button. So you go to the icon labelled participants at the bottom of your screen, and you click the button labelled raise hand. And you're welcome to give it a go now if it's technology you haven't tried before. And what it does, it puts a little blue hands up sign on your screen that I'm able to see, and then I know that I need to come to you for questions when we're on to the question and answer session. And I'll be taking a note so that I try not to forget anybody. So please do that. And if you can't find that button, you've also got a reactions button where you can do clapping and thumbs up, and I'll check if there's anything you want to say. So Mike Stubbs, I can see your hands up. Jill, brilliant, hands up, so it's working. That is fabulous. If you are dialed in on a phone rather than using an app or a computer, you're not going to be able to use the participate button. We'd still love to hear from you. So what you need to do is email events@party.coop. My colleague Izzy is on the call, and she's been organising all of these, and she is monitoring that inbox. And what that means is that she will be able to send over your questions to me, and I'll try and make sure that they're included and we unmute you to ask it. And I think that is my main housekeeping. So rather than bore you any longer, I will hand over to Harriet. Harriet is the head of engagement at the Plunkett Foundation. She's been at the Plunkett Foundation since 2008, so is a veritable expert, and she's supporting the Rural Community Shops project, and now delivers membership, events, communications, marketing activity, and leads the whole engagement team. So we are very lucky to have her with us. She is dialing in from Oxfordshire, which sounds much nicer than stuffy London, as she's able to go on long bike rides without seeing anybody, whereas I can barely step out the house without bumping into a supermarket queue. So I'm very jealous, and she comes complete with bunting, which is much nicer than my Co-op Party banner as well. So I will hand over. Harriet's got a few slides and pictures to talk us through, as well as talking about some of the challenges that community shops are facing through coronavirus, some of the inspirational actions they're taking to help communities meet those challenges, and hopefully ways in which we can either help during this crisis or get involved after this is all over to inspire community business in our own neighbourhoods. So I will hand over to Harriet.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you very much, Anna, and it's very lovely to join you all, so thank you very much for the invitation to share an update with you today. So thank you for the introduction as well. I am joining you from Oxford. It's quite sunny at the moment, which is good. But a little bit of background of Plunkett Foundation. So I think many of you will be familiar with Plunkett. We have been around a while as an organisation. We've been up and running for over 100 years. So yeah, very, very proud of our history and our support of community business and community cooperatives. So we operate nationally, so we are working with predominantly rural community groups in all corners of the UK, so all across England and also in Wales and Scotland, Northern Ireland, and of course, you know, across those nations we do work slightly differently to adapt to kind of what services and support is available, but our core service and the majority of our programmes are available all across the UK. So Plunkett, we are very well known for our support for community shops, but we support the community cooperative model. So we have got 600 community cooperatives that are up and running at the moment, open and trading, and kind of a very broad sweep of what that looks like. That's about 400 community shops, about 130 community pubs, and then the others are made up of woodlands or cafes, bookshops. We've had laundrettes as well in the past, and general community hubs there. So we're very much there for anybody who wants to explore that model rather than limited by enterprise type. It's a very, very active sector. It's a sector that is absolutely kind of growing in its development. It's as I say, a growing model, but it's a resilient model. So we're delighted to see success rates of around the high 90s. So to date, no community pub has actually ever closed. So we celebrate 100% success rate. And we have, in terms of shops, we're seeing about a 95% success rate there. So when we compare that to the typical success rate of small and medium enterprises of around the 45% mark, we are pretty proud of the work that goes on in rural communities all across the UK. So our role at Plunkett is both to support rural community groups who want to get started when it comes to a community business. So we will offer them that help and support at the early stages. We'll help them in terms of governance and structure and community shares, navigate the legal, the finance, the tax and things like that. And also we will run a variety of programs to give them help and support and a little bit of funding. It's predominantly business advice rather than funding, but we do have kind of loan and grants attached to the work that we do. So that in a nutshell is Plunkett. It's key to say as well that we are there both at startup stage, but also as these community groups and these community businesses are up and running. So some of our members have been running for 20 years and others are just, as I say, kind of in the initial few months of trading. But we have that support service and membership there to help them at kind of every step of their journey. So it's a little bit of kind of a whistle-stop tour of Plunkett. If anyone would like to find out more about what we do, then you obviously have my contact details after this, so do just drop me a note. But obviously I'm joining you today to talk a bit more about the actual response to the current crisis that we are all experiencing. And what I wanted to do was kind of kick off the presentation and kind of a chat today really to give recognition to the incredible response of community cooperatives all across the UK. They are small businesses, they are committee-led, very heavily reliant on volunteers, but I'll say they're absolutely at the forefront of the current crisis and looking after the most vulnerable members of their communities. So what they are doing is no less than amazing. What I have got is, if technology helps me, is a few pictures just to give you a snapshot of what's happening across the UK, and then I'll come back to talking a little bit more about the details. So if I share screen, you should be able to see this. Is that working? Brilliant. Can you all see that? Good. Excellent. So that's the opening slide. We've done that bit. So this is our shop in Hinton St George down in Somerset. They have adapted their service so that they're still providing essential supplies and groceries to the local community. As you can see, they've got kind of that vibrancy there as well. You know, that the community feel really is coming to the fore, and they are celebrating the reconnection, but also the very serious business of making sure that those supplies are getting out to, again, every member of their community, but also those that are vulnerable, that can't access online deliveries, that they are being looked after and checked in on as well. So just to give you a little bit of a flavour, the shop manager at Hinton St George shop typically works a 20-hour week. I believe in the last few weeks she has been working closer to 50 hours per week. So demand for their service is through the roof, and actually volunteers and members of staff are stepping up like they have never done before, which is incredible, but also not surprising because we know this is what community groups are all about. This is Kingsbury Community Centre and Shop. Again, also Somerset. So I do leave Somerset in this presentation, but just that recognition again that they're adhering to social distancing. They've got volunteers in place. I think they're effectively bouncers. So we know our community businesses are creating new volunteer roles, and one of the most popular ones in the sector is actually to be outside at a 2-metre distance, but ensuring others are following suit. And it's actually at this time quite a sociable way of actually seeing members of a community in a safe way. But again, you can see that there are queues outside the door. So as you'll see again throughout this presentation, demand is at an all-time high. And this lovely picture is Hudswell. So this is Yorkshire, a small community up in the Yorkshire Dales. They are, many of you will have heard of them, I'm sure, George and Dragon community pub. And they always hitting headlines. They're camera award winners, very often kind of in the media, and it's because they are so incredible. So they took over their pub, I want to say 2008, sorry, I'll do my fact check. But actually how they've adapted is obviously they've had to close their pub service, but they already had in the corner of their pub, in one of the side rooms, what they called their little shop. At one time it was recognised as the smallest shop in the UK, but in this current crisis it has got slightly bigger. So they have adapted some of the pub space in order to get more stock in and to kind of expand that service there for their local community. And you can see that they've kind of managing that through the door there and taking orders. They've got their shop list, and that is a kind of a very well used service at the moment. Later on, I will touch on some of the challenges our groups are experiencing, and we are seeing big challenges around kind of stocks and supply. But you can see here on the blackboard that lots of kind of fresh produce, and absolutely at a time like this, local producers and local networks are coming to the fore. So that's a lovely picture. That's Stuart, the landlord, who usually be behind the bar, but he's behind the till. This is a little photo that the Pheasant pub in Nington in Shropshire sent us, and it's just an example again how that pub is adapted into actually that kind of shop service and is gathering kind of local produce and fresh produce and essentials for the local community. And I am told that that's hand churned butter in the basket there, but freshness is absolutely to the fore. This is the King's Arms in Sholdham, again adapting a takeaway service, and again making sure that they are reaching members of their community that need them at a time where they're needed most. This is Wigington shop in Hertfordshire. So again, many of our shops, they have that essential groceries range, and also a lot of local supply produce, which is lovely, and at a time like this a very reliable source of supply. But many of our shops in particular have a cafe element, which is that social element, bringing people together, and they haven't wanted to lose that at this point. So they've had to close the cafe element, keeping the shop element open, but many of our groups are offering takeaway services as well. So again, it's recognised kind of income for them. The shops are doing pretty well in terms of income, because I think many are quoting it's like Christmas Eve every night. With that comes its challenges, but the takeaway service as well is kind of making sure that they are keeping the different elements of their business going, and also again supporting the community as best they can and adding a little bit of vibrancy at this time. So that chap looks pretty pleased with his takeaway coffees. This is the Abington Arms. They are doing, again, adapting their service, so they're doing takeaways. They've also got, again, a shop element here at Abington Arms, actually down the road from me in Oxfordshire. I haven't made the most of the takeaway service, and perhaps I should, but you can see that they're doing roast dinners, and actually they're reaching a lot of kind of older community members who aren't able to kind of cook for themselves, as many of us are. So again, it's a vital service there. It's kind of providing level of employment as well, and kind of keeping that kind of trying to keep a level with the business, so that when we are through this in a matter of months, I assume, that they have a business that can open its doors again, and has kind of kept a little bit of a balance on trading. This is the Bevy. This is actually an urban group, so it's the Bevy Pub down near Brighton, and they are phenomenal in what they do, and they are a real community hub. And of course, having to shut their doors has had a huge impact on that. And the Bevy, I would say, probably more acutely aware of the needs of their community than many of our community businesses. They are very, very connected with the most vulnerable of their local residents. And here we've got kind of a picture of them delivering their Meals on Wheels. So they're taking that kind of hot meal service out again to those that need it most. And of course, when they're delivering food, these are often volunteers, but it's also a way to check in on the health of residents, and to escalate kind of any needs or concerns. And it really is just kind of that reconnection of community that is definitely experiencing a revival through all this. So that's a little flavour of kind of what's happening really across the network, and I would say it's happening with absolutely every single shop, pub that we have got up and running under community ownership. It's also starting to hit the headlines. So here's a little kind of clip from a community group in Hampshire. So actually they're on Plunkett's radar because they are currently campaigning to save their pub under community ownership. So the Plough in Long Parish. Plunkett members, very active, very savvy group. But the connections that they've made in their campaign to save their pub, which is still underway, they've not opened the doors under community ownership just yet. But it's actually stood them in really good stead at this point of crisis, because they again have had, through trying to campaign to save the pub, they've reconnected, they've created a community committee, and effectively those networks and those links put them in really good stead to respond to the needs. So as well in Long Parish, they've got a shop which is not community owned, but the owners of that shop are actually in their 80s. So I think the community group is very aware of their vulnerability at this current time. And also, as I've mentioned, around our shop in Hinton St George, the demand on shop staff and shop teams at the moment has just gone absolutely through the roof. So a couple in their 80s running a small village shop, they just are not able to cope with that increase in demand. So the community network there has stepped in. And so whilst on one hand they're campaigning to save their pub, they've also stepped in and they are now running the local shop along with the guidance of the owners, who are obviously having to self-isolate given their age and circumstance. So that's a really, really kind of lovely kind of heartwarming story, again capturing the true response of communities at this time. And also a bit of recognition as well in Devon Live for a number of community shops down in Devon. So this particular article features Ashwater and Tallerton, and it's just giving recognition to the flexibility, the adaptability, the agility of volunteers all stepping in to serve their local communities at this point. So that's, I think, a very worthy celebration of what's happening across the community cooperative network. And what I'll do now is I'll stop sharing my screen and come back to talking to you. So we are hearing every day amazing examples from community groups of how they're stepping up and how they're delivering an astounding service and delivering kind of against all the odds, really, because it doesn't happen easily and our members are experiencing a number of issues. So to give you a flavour of the challenges that are associated with community cooperatives at this time, typically, well, the big headliner is obviously seeing the closure of pubs and cafes, and we are seeing a number of shops close because of some of the challenges that I'll go through now. So that big headliner is a number having to shut their doors, which is far from ideal. But as you can see, when it comes to community pubs, a number have adapted that service. So a number of kind of more commercial pubs, or ones that have been kind of tenanted by kind of the bigger pub co's, they've just shut their doors. whereas the community-owned ones, we're seeing them actually step up and thinking, well, actually, how else can we support our community at this time? Yes, we can't be behind the bar, we can't be serving pints, but there's a huge amount of other stuff we can be doing. So it's very humbling to see that response from the network. Doesn't happen easily. So typically the volunteer profile of our network would be volunteers in their 70s, 80s, some in their 90s. So within the network, they haven't got access to their usual volunteer base, which at a time when we've just seen kind of, unprecedented demand, they're having to do so much more on so much less kind of people capacity. The silver lining is that obviously with changing patterns and people working from home, furloughed staff, there is a kind of a greater availability of younger volunteers, and they are stepping into the mix without a doubt. But of course, for those running the community businesses, with new volunteers, they don't automatically know how everything works, and they're willing and they've got the time and they've got the goodwill, but with that obviously comes training challenges. So again, we're seeing one set of volunteers kind of move out and self-isolate and having to kind of be looked after by the community cooperative in ways that we've just seen. But we're also seeing the need to train up new volunteers and to get them involved. Long term, we think this is going to be a really, really positive thing, because we think it will open up that volunteer profile. We think it will open up how people do get involved and support local communities. So long term, really positive. Short term, they are certainly feeling the pinch and making sure that people are resourced and trained and stepping into those new roles. So as well as training new volunteers, they're obviously, as we've mentioned, introducing new services. They're creating new home delivery services, and again, this does not happen by magic. So a lot of shops are taking calls over the phone, taking down orders with pen and paper, gathering that for members of the community, putting it together and getting those out the door. They're adapting how they're taking orders, they're adapting how they're stocking the shop, they're adapting how they're taking payment, and they're adapting how they're delivering. So as you can hear, a lot of adapting going on, so they definitely need the credit for that. So challenges, but they are stepping up to them and they are delivering. One big kind of national issue that if you've got kind of connections with Plunkett already, you'll have seen is a very active campaign for us at the moment, and that actually is around stock and supply issues. So as I talk through this, if people have got ideas, connections, ideas, influence, then do please make yourselves known. So we are seeing this tension between small rural community shops absolutely stepping up to the mark, delivering, looking after the most vulnerable members of our communities. As I say, doing so much more on so much less. But one big hurdle they have got is they cannot get the stocks and supplies. So we have seen and heard from members that they're typically getting orders at about 40% of what they would be expecting, and what they're getting very little of tinned produce, anything tinned, flour, pasta, rice, all those essentials, cleaning products, really those things that are making the difference to particularly older members of the community at this point in time. Fresh produce, fairly stable, which is fantastic. So again, one of the opportunities around this is really that reinvigoration and reconnection with local networks, and that's something that Plunkett are very, very kind of keen to gather more momentum on. It's something that we've always done, but we think this is now time to add more resource to that than before. But the volunteers within these networks, they've typically had deliveries dropped at the door, and they've been able to stock the shelves and have those essential produce up and out there. But many have had their deliveries stopped, full stop. Others use services like a click and collect with their local wholesaler, and that has been suspended as well. So what we have seen is that in these challenging times, that again, volunteers have adapted. So we're hearing, again, so many examples of volunteers getting up at the crack of dawn, doing 40-mile round trips to the wholesalers and gambling on what they can get. And there's kind of like, this is a more of an in-depth issue for us that we are campaigning on. We've definitely got the ear of DEFRA, we've got the ear of wholesalers, but one big question that I shall phrase sensitively, is we're obviously seen as a nation a narrative that is very reassuring in terms of supermarkets being well stocked again. And I'm speaking to kind of retailers, and we're seeing kind of 80–90% stock back in supermarkets. And where we were seeing panic buying, which is very frustrating because of course that's had its knock-on effects, and that is certainly part of this issue that our rural community shop networks are experiencing now. But if I go to the local supermarket because I'm fit and able to, I'm seeing very well stocked shelves, and I'm also not seeing any more of those limited purchases, the restrictions on purchases. Those are being lifted. So the question that we have and we keep asking is, how can we see a national narrative of supermarkets being well stocked, available with all the products that our community group, our community shop members can't access. So we are banging that drum. We will continue to do so as long as it is an issue for our members. So that is a big challenge that we are experiencing at the moment. And of course, you know, we're working with small businesses who are experiencing the same challenges as bigger businesses, how many, as we've said, having to close their doors, adapt services. So we are getting a lot of support and help out there to community groups to help them navigate government schemes and support that is thankfully available, and a lot of our groups will benefit from that, but that is not necessarily easy to navigate. So we are helping our members through that. And of course, with new services comes new regulations and compliance. So where groups are now having to do takeaway service, or pubs have become small retailers, they're obviously having to adhere to different health and safety and rules and regulations there. So again, we are helping them navigate that. I'll kind of wrap up soon because I think I've talked quite a lot, but other kind of areas that we're working on is policy representation. So we are keeping very connected with our members, trying to understand, you know, what the challenges are on a day-to-day level, and again trying to represent their needs as best we can. We're writing letters to DEFRA Secretary of State, we're connecting with MPs almost on a daily basis, working with media, we're getting journalist inquiries. So again, we're trying to very much represent that voice of the rural community shop and cooperative pub network at this point in time, and just really try to understand the challenges that they're facing, because they've got a huge amount to celebrate, but it's not happening easily. So the more we can do to help represent them and kind of help the day-to-day be that little bit easier for them, then that's very much what we see as our role, and I'm sure you'll all join me kind of on that. The only other thing I was going to say was that I want to end on a positive, to say that we really do see there's an opportunity around this, that there is a revival of community, there's a revival of local connection, there's a revival of recognising your neighbours, supporting your neighbours. Really that vibrancy we're seeing kind of reintroduced back into rural communities, and I know everyone on this call now will be representing communities all across the UK, and I'm sure we're seeing the same patterns, whether that's urban, rural, suburban, really isolated, that connection is coming back. So that's something that we're really keen to focus on and try and resource that movement and that change in the medium and long term. So in Plunkett's discussions with policymakers, with funders, with partners, with members, we are focusing not just on this kind of current crisis and what we need to do, but actually what changes we'll see longer term. You know, we will emerge from lockdown, I think, a very different society with a different set of priorities, and I think we think the network does see real opportunity there for kind of community reconnection. So I will stop rambling on, but hopefully that's a nice overview of what's happening, and very happy to take any questions.
Not a ramble at all. I can see a hand up from Norman and Andrew. Just if anyone else wants to ask a question in our first round, now is the moment to find that participate button at the bottom. As we wait, I will unmute you, Norman.
Hello, can you hear me? Right, thanks very much, Harriet, for a very interesting talk. You're doing some wonderful work there. I noticed that all your work at the moment is in rural communities. I expect you have thought, you know, what are the possibilities of extending this idea into more urban areas where there's still a great need in many places to bring communities together? and this would be seen to be an ideal way of doing it. So that's one question. I expect you have thought about this already. The second question I have, if I may ask you, about your pricing. How do you actually go about pricing your goods? I mean, obviously you want to cover your costs. Is that just, is that all you aim to do, cover your costs? And if so, how do your prices compare with local supermarkets and so on? I mean, do you find competition a problem? So it's a question about pricing, really. Thank you.
I'm going to take questions in 3 in case I warned Harriet, so she should have a pen and paper, but I'm also making a note too. I saw your hand up. Oh, nope, you're still muted. I think you might need to hit unmute too.
Yeah, I've done it. Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Harriet. That's really illuminating. I'd just like to tell you very briefly what our situation is. I live in a small village on the Nottinghamshire-Derbyshire border. We have a manor room, which is quite old and which was given to the village about 100 years ago. And it's been renovated and it's running really well. And in there we have a pop-up pub once a month. And the pop-up pub is suspended, but the pop-up pub has translated. We got a different volunteer who's running a pop-up shop for 2 hours every morning for people within walking distance. We're getting deliveries from a local butcher, including eggs and fish and stuff, and also from a farm shop, vegetables, and the person running it is able to get the other material from supermarkets. So getting from wholesalers is not really an issue because it's more about supply than about price. So that's working really well. So my first question is, what is it that the Plunkett Foundation does that would be helpful to this type of arrangement? Because this is all based on a local community, but the way we're doing it has just kind of evolved to work in our situation. So are there things that you could suggest that we could link up with in terms of the Plunkett Foundation? And the second question is, we're in a neighbourhood forum with 3 villages. One of them is like about 2 miles away, and it's a former mining village and quite depressed. And I think would benefit from other forms of cooperative activity, not a shop because it's got a very vibrant co-op, and there's another co-op in the 3rd village, a regular co-op food store, but other types of activity possibly related to employment generation and things like that. So are there ways that we could build on what we have in these villages to go in that direction? And could you help us with that kind of thing?
Great. And Mariana, I hope when we unmute Mariana, when I can find her, you all admire her screen.
Oh, thank you. It is a bit childish, but I'm bringing on my superpowers. Norman stole my thunder. I was going to actually ask a question related to the fact that I'm from Lambeth and very much inner city. But I think the one thing that this COVID crisis has shown is that there are so many that are under the radar who are vulnerable, and all the groups, the mutual groups that have sprung up have shown a real need for some of the excellent examples that you showed in your presentation. I'm concerned that the sort of barriers to entry are so much higher in a town setting where you have exorbitant sort of business rates. Do you offer advice into that? Because we do have in Lambeth a really healthy pop-up sort of culture, but because of the nature of where we are, it's very much geared at middle-class consumers supporting middle-class consumers, and not necessarily real sort of community vulnerable people. So I'd really like to have some practical advice as to how we harness what we've already got now, which is a real grassroots sort of mutual movement, and make it something more tangible.
Great, over to you, Harriet.
Cool, excellent, thank you very much. So I'll head back to you, Norman. So your question was around kind of rural and urban for Plunkett. So Plunkett, we are a national charity, and it's in our charitable objectives to support rural communities through social enterprise and cooperatives. So actually our mission through and through is supporting rural groups. But we do but that means that if it comes down to the absolute core of it, that's where our money and resources got to go to. However, we do have a number of projects that do support urban groups, and our philosophy is very much, if we have the knowledge to share, then of course we will do everything that we can share. So if it came down to having to pay for an advisor from Plunkett's reserves, then they would have to be rural. But we do have projects that current, so our More Than a Pubs programme, which is out into urban groups as well, because we've got that knowledge on setting up a community pub. We've had projects in the past around urban growing or urban shops. So effectively our resources got to be focused on rural, but we work with a whole network of funders. So where it's appropriate, it will be rural, rural and beyond. So we absolutely, where we can, we will offer our skills and advice and be as open as we can. So for example, we've got a set of Facebook groups that is not restricted to rural only, and there's a huge amount of knowledge and experience on there. But
jump in on that, you work with other organisations who do fund urban ones as well, so it'd be good if you could sort of flag organisations those of us in urban areas might also get in touch with, and I can include links to them in the email afterwards.
Definitely. So Plunkett, we're very much about collaboration and partnership working, because that is what we all do. So we also work very closely with an organisation called Locality, and Mariana, that would be a good kind of signposting for you as well, but I will come back to your question too. So we work with Co-ops UK, work with Locality, big funder Paris Change, who are either urban focused or you have that flexibility and adaptability to work more closely with urban groups. So in a nutshell, we share our knowledge absolutely as much as we can, but our charitable objectives are rooted in rural. In terms of pricing of goods, Norman, so Plunkett, we are the charity that supports the model. So we don't get involved in the day-to-day business running of the community shops that we work with. So they will be responsible for their own pricing mechanisms. We will provide advice. So for example, if you're a Plunkett member, you have access to a health check, and that will be an advisor going in and working with that group and whatever their issues might be. So it would cover issues and guidance on pricing. But it's actually kind of an interesting question, because some of the feedback we've had from members lately is actually they're having to go to wholesalers and they're a price mark goods, so they might buy a packet of cereal for £1.29, but actually they're having to pay over £1.29 to purchase it, but they're having to sell it on the shelf for £1.29. So pricing is a really kind of key thing and a key kind of area that our groups need kind of training and support on. But it's something we don't get overly involved in. We do have a lot of data collection. So one link that I might share with you, Anna, is to our Better Business reports. And that's kind of an annual check-in with all of our groups of what they're doing and some benchmarking there. So we know that actually in many cases our networks are comparative to supermarket prices. In some cases cheaper, in some cases more expensive, but it will vary between products. And we know that it's absolutely kind of a vital priority for our groups that they do have a whole range of products, so from value range through to kind of more daily items, but that's something they're very aware of. Hopefully that helps, Norman, but if you wanted to pick up separately, then please do let me know. Andrew, that sounds like a lovely manor room that you've got in your community, and I think kind of one kind of element of advice I would say is just keep connected. So we have got those Facebook groups, and I would say it's absolutely appropriate for members of your community to register, join in that conversation, see what's going on. On a practical day-to-day level, there'll be lots of help and support and advice in there. So obviously your community managing a pop-up shop, that will have lots of challenges and questions and queries that comes with it, and I would say that Facebook group would be a go-to check-in. Be kind of open and say that you're not kind of a registered community benefit society or anything at this point, but there's a lot of information and so much goodwill in those groups that's definitely a go-to place for you now, I would say. And you never know, in 6 months' time, the community might want to establish you know, establish a business that is open more hours, does have a different kind of a legal structure, does a community share issue. So I would just kind of keep tuned in and keep connected. And as and when your needs as a community grow and develop, then just give us a call and talk through everything. But there's, yeah, I'd say definitely when you're off this call, join the Facebook group and see what's going on there. And you mentioned the neighbourhood, the mining village. It made me think that every village has got a unique set of resources, whether that's people, whether that's space, and with that comes different opportunities. So my kind of advice would still be the same, that kind of keep connected, and as and where there's an appetite to explore different ideas, then do give us a call. We've got our community business team, and they are more than happy to chat through initial ideas and share their wisdom at kind of the earliest stages of any project. So I'm just racking my brains as to the specific question that you had, Andrew. You mentioned kind of employment generation. I mean, when you were speaking, I was thinking really about the creation of a community hub. And again, you know, we've worked with groups that have started a small shop in a cupboard of a village hall, and it's now grown into a dedicated extension of the village hall, and really quite a substantial business. So they've been running for almost 20 years, I think. So these smaller scale ideas make a huge impact in the community on a day-to-day, but they have that potential to grow. So I think, again, the same advice, just keep connected. But again, if you wanted to contact a community business team at any point, they'd be very happy to chat through with you. Mariana, your question really around obviously kind of community action in more urban areas. Very similar kind of advice, I would say, in response to Norman's question, that connect up with our partners. Plunkett, we do have some advice and resources that capture some of the work that we have done in urban groups. But there are different sets of challenges between different geographical regions. So I would very much recommend getting in touch with Locality. They've got a huge membership network as well. We work really closely with them. They will be project partners. So again, it's that kind of that same advice of call us and keep connected. And if there was something particularly you liked the look of in kind of Plunkett's repertoire, and you thought, actually, I'd really like to activate something like that in my community, or want to see what the potential is, again, we could have that conversation, but we can share experience. But when it comes to actually accessing different projects and funding, we would direct you to Locality or Power to Change. In the past, we have had an urban shops programme. So if we had advice and help, then we would be delighted to. But again, I think, you know, one of the things we do at Plunkett, and one of the things I'm very proud of, is that you can't standardise any community. So we would always encourage people to give us a call, drop us an email, let us know what your individual set of circumstances are, and we can kind of tailor a response to those needs. So sorry, my mind did go a little bit blurry with the questions. So I hope I've answered them, but if not, do let me know.
Hands up, if that's all right. So question askers, and Harriet, if we keep it brief, because I appreciate I've kept you a long time. Pauline, you wanted to ask a question. I've unmuted you.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm a community councillor where I live, and we've got a very good co-ops as our local shop, so that's a good thing. But what we haven't got around here really is enough community space. We have got a couple of estates that have been built which will have Section 106 money, which is for the village halls, but they're going to be very small, but we don't know who's going to run them yet. And I'm just wondering although we're Colchester as a town, we're right in the north of town, we're right next to the villages, we're surrounded by villages on three sides where I live. So we've only got one side of the village, one side of our area that is connected to the town. But it's around other things, not just shops. But I mean, we haven't got a library, and we don't have enough community space, and there's not enough other things that are going on really. We haven't got, you know, different things that we can do as a community. So I just wondered what help that was, and whether it would be Localities or Plunkett.
Great. And last question is from Nutan Modi. I've unmuted you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Harriet. I just wondered what links you had with the cooperative development agencies, which tend to, I guess, do the same sort of work in urban areas. Do you work with them at all, or are you detached from them, or how does that work?
Lovely, thank you very much. Harriet, some quick answers as part of your sum up. Fabulous.
I will. I think for Pauline, I think it's the same advice, kind of keep connected, get in touch, tell us kind of what your ideas and opportunities are. And again, no community is the same, but what Plunkett wants to do is kind of take the stress out of navigating what is a very kind of complex landscape, and try and kind of direct you as and when your ideas develop, try and connect you really to the best places. And actually, one link I meant to mention for you, Mariana, is a website called My Community. So it's something that's funded by MHCLG, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and Power to Change, and it's run by locality, but it is connecting a network of, I think, currently 12 community organisations, of which Plunkett is one of them. We all feed into it, so there's a whole host of information there, and that's it's a fairly newish website. I think my comms manager is on a meeting with them at the moment where they're reviewing their marketing plan. But it is under kind of testing phase at the moment, and there is information on there. But again, that's a great way to connect with help and support available. So New Tenant, I'd say the same as well. It really is about kind of accessing those wider connections. So Plunkett's strategy is we're 2.5 years into our 5-year strategy. So again, I can send that link to you, Anna. But one of our key areas of our strategy is collaboration. So we do work collaboratively with a whole host of organisations, including co-op development agencies. Of course, it over time and what's happening, it always kind of ebb and flow, but it is always absolutely an open door, and we always want to kind of build and strengthen relationships so we can all contribute to the communities that we all want to see, that are vibrant, that are thriving, that are resilient. So Plunkett is under no illusion whatsoever that happens on our own. So it's very much about connection and collaboration. So yeah, again, any links that anyone would like to make or introductions, then please do. And as I say, it's all about kind of relationship building.
Lovely. And I think only 20 minutes longer than we were meant to. Very interesting. I am going to wrap it up there. You can all email events@party.coop if there's anything that occurs to you now that we haven't had a chance to cover, and I'm very happy to pass things on to Harriet if you've got ideas or queries after we finish. This will be on YouTube in the next couple of days, and I'll circulate the link. Those of you who joined last week, you'll know that Easter weekend disrupted my usual sending of the email afterwards, so apologies if you're waiting for me to send things from last week's Zoom call. You will get a double whammy this week, but I've got lots of things coming through from Harriet. And Andrew, if you're still there and you wanted to send us a paragraph about your example in Nottinghamshire, we'd love to let people know about that too, so do get in touch, although it looks like I'm speaking to an empty room there. So thank you very much for joining. I think we've got a few councillors on the call, so if you are joining us for our councillor call later, that is this evening with Jim McMahon MP, who is the new Shadow Transport Secretary, and then we will be back at the same time next week, Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And I look forward very much to seeing lots of your faces again then. So a big thank you and virtual applause for Harriet, or a real life applause from a nice one. That's our first round of applause, Harriet.
Oh, thank you.
And I hope that you're all staying safe and staying at home and staying sane. Thank you very much for joining. Bye bye all.
Bye, thank you.